All right, this is Jason. I'm here with Carl and Ryan, and we just said goodbye to Forrest so that he could watch the UCLA football game. um, we just finished a 6-round game of Axis&Allies 1942 second edition. As you can see, Moscow has fallen to a combined German and Japanese attack. The Russians came out very strong and aggressive out of the gate, attacked 3 territories, and pressed on to Leningrad. The Leningrad attack was meant to be just a strafing raid. For better or worse, the Russians accidentally scored 5 out of 5 hits and knocked out all of the German infantry there, trapping what was left of the Russian offensive units in a place where they were vulnerable to a massive German counterattack from a stack of 7 or 8 tanks in the Baltic states. After that, the Russians were pushed back pretty forcefully with help from a 5-bomber strategic bombing campaign by the Axis. Meanwhile, the British fleet was sunk on Round 1 and Round 2, giving the Allies a somewhat slower start in Western Europe. There was a tug-of-war in France and Northwest Europe, and at the high water mark, the Allies made it as far as Italy, but with Moscow out of the way, the Germans were free to divert all of their spending into Western Europe, and were pushing back and would probably have swept the Allies onto the beaches on a turn 7. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the Japanese and Americans had some very unorthodox naval battles. At one point, there were 0 carriers left in the Pacific, with battleships being left to pick up the slack. There were several 50-50 battles where both sides wiped each other out and just kept rebuilding, with the Americans taking Wake Island and Iwo Jima, and then the Japanese eventually countering and invading Alaska in force. In the final position, you can see that the United States is torn between defending the western United States and defending Hawaii for the final victory city for the Axis. Meanwhile, India hangs on a razor's edge. The Japanese don't quite have enough troops to take it reliably this turn, but with a factory in the Caucasus cranking out 4 Japanese tanks a turn, plus some reinforcing Germans left over from the sack on Moscow, it looks like India is also just a matter of time for the Axis. It's a very enjoyable game, very high-spirited, lots of interesting and unorthodox attacks that were all reasonably effective. It's just a battle board where the Axis were able to take down Moscow and then run away with the game. Thank you everyone for coming and playing.